Good day, and welcome to the Lillyroddyshow, coming to you from the LRS studios here in Houston, Texas. And of course, thank you so much for joining me this week so I can share my astrological perspective about what's going on with the planets. This week, we'll be looking at the week of July 12th through July 18th, 2015. This week promises to be a very active and potentially unsettling week. I'll be providing some of the details about the times this week when it'll be the craziest. Also, I'll talk about the weather here in Houston and the stock market and the trends that are coming up. We're sort of taking a general look at that. And of course, now that midsummer has arrived, the temperatures and humidity are really being turned up in Houston, and it's always so steamy when I get out to do my walks. But apparently, the park I walk at is becoming a lot more popular. I'm not sure I like that. But anyway, let's see what's going on for July 12th through July 18th. Essentially, what's going on in the sky is that we're having the inner planets, three of them, Sun, Mercury, and Mars, are moving through the sign of Cancer. And as they move through Cancer, they will make contact with this ongoing Uranus-Pluto square that I talk about frequently. The Uranus-Pluto square is the alignment of these two planets sitting at right angles to each other since 2008. And these two planets will be square to each other two more times. The last time is in mid-April of 2016. After that, these two planets will slowly begin to move apart, although they will be within range of each other probably through the end of 2017. And it's these two planets, Uranus and Pluto, that are creating this really large process of change that's going on over the whole planet. And of course, we're seeing some of that with the IMF and the Greek economy, all these things. I believe Greece, in its most current chart, has a lot of Cancer in it, so Mars is moving through Cancer. Now, whenever the inner planets, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, move through a cardinal sign, they activate this Uranus-Pluto square. And typically, this would happen 4 times a year. We did have this occur earlier this year during April when the planets moved through Aries. Most of you will remember how edgy that time was. And we have been feeling some of this extra tension from the Pluto-Uranus square really starting last week on Monday, July 6th. During this time frame this week, July 12th through the 18th, people may seem, during this time frame, just harder to get along with, crabbier to even violent. This doesn't mean this is the only way these energies can show themselves, but for people that are holding things in during this time, this will be likely to be an explosive time, and they will be letting out that energy. And of course, we're more likely to see a more authentic and more raw side of our humanity. Now, on the positive side of these energies, this is really about sort of confronting who you are and clearing out the parts and the aspects of your personality that are toxic, that don't provide support for you to grow forward, to create real security, real relationships, and real commitment in your life. July 14th, 15th, and 16th are probably the most intense days that we're dealing with the 15th sort of being the most intense. For most of us, we'll just feel out of sorts. We may feel like we have a lot of ideas, but we're not really able to put them into a clear sense of action, or maybe not even have a clear sense of purpose. And just to add to the confusion, around the 15th, we also have a new moon in Cancer. Personally, I would try to keep my schedule and agenda as flexible as I can throughout this entire week, especially on Wednesday, Thursday, 15th, and 16th. And one good thing for this week, there are no long void, of course, moon time frames, so that should help us to keep us more emotionally grounded. Also this month, Venus goes retrograde. Now, Venus goes retrograde about every 2 years, and her retrograde process for us will start on July 15th as well. That's 2015. And Venus will be retrograde until September 25th of 2015. Venus retrograde is a time when we review our commitments, our investments, and really look at the whole idea of how much we value ourselves. Since Venus rules the notions of love and beauty, with the retrograde, it's not a good time to buy new furniture, to get a whole new look, or to go on some shopping spree. We may feel that we need to make some changes because of the Venus retrograde, but this is more a time of exploring those ideas rather than acting on what we think we want to do. Now, if you would like to get in touch with me, you can always reach me here at Lillyroddyshow.com. You can email me at Lillyroddyshow@AOL.com, or find us on Twitter, Facebook, or Pinterest. We have some great sites on Twitter and Pinterest. And if you sign up there, you can get my daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly forecast. I will post all those links on the YouTube site. Well, let's have a look at the Houston weather from the Houston chart. The astrological chart that I use for Houston comes from Mark Penfield's book on charts of the Americas. And for those hardcore folks, here's the data I use on my Houston's birthday, August 24th, 1836, 12:59 p.m. in Houston. Now, and just to check that, the chart that I use has 6 degrees Sag rising and 16 degrees Virgo at our midheaven. In Houston, last year, 2014, and in this year, 2015, we have really been under the influence of transiting Neptune. And the days that we experienced all those intense times of flooding at the end of May and early June was actually when the planets in the sky were making contact with Neptune in the sky. And of course, those planets were then making aspects and contact with the Houston chart. And so it looks to me that we're going to be under the influence of Neptune well through the end of 2016. So what that looks like is it looks like the possibilities of rain and flooding will continue to be a big part of Houston's weather, at least through the end of 2016. I know that's longer than 2015. Yes, 2016. Storms, like hurricanes, are usually generated from a combination of things that show up in the sky. But we really need to see Uranus and Jupiter making some sort of show in order to generate enough energy and wind, to create a hurricane. Now, one thing that is moving in is Jupiter is going to move into Virgo on August 11th. And as it does, Jupiter will be moving through Houston's chart since Houston is a Virgo city. Jupiter is one of the planets that's really active and creates a lot of storm potential. Usually Jupiter, depending on what sign it's in, creates a lot more wind than water, but it does generate a whole lot of wind. Also, whenever we see Neptune really strong and even Uranus, those are all things that generate a lot of activity, and particularly if those planets are making aspect in the Houston chart. And the other factor that I'm looking at is the fact that Saturn goes direct on August 2nd. Saturn will be moving over the ascendant of Houston's chart. Technically, that'll be taking place at the end of November. And it may be the influence of Saturn that actually keeps the level of the intensity of the storms down. Usually Saturn isn't real good for storm development, although sometimes it can show up if there's a lot of damage. Now, not only will Saturn conjunct our ascendant, but it will also square Uranus, our planet of storms, in the Houston chart. So I don't necessarily see any hurricanes, but I do believe we could have some strong tropical storms, especially in the latter part of August and in the beginning of September. But I don't think we're going to have a hurricane this year. But I do think we'll have plenty of rain and plenty of tropical storms, so you should be prepared for some flooding and high water. Neptune really doesn't move out of Houston's chart for quite a while, and that may be really until we get to 2017. So I'm sure that our city government will be attempting to work on all those areas that flood every time. Don't you think that's where they should be working, on the areas that flood every time? Anyway, that's why I'm not in the government. Our next topic for today is the Dow Jones. Now, the information I use for my Dow Jones index chart is July 3rd, 1880 at 4:10 a.m. local mean time in New York City. One thing I've noticed about the Dow is that the Dow seems to be very active, meaning that the Dow's moving up, when the planets are moving through mutable signs. And generally, when the planets move through mutable sign, the Dow tends to move upward. However, when Saturn's in a mutable sign and moves through the Dow, she usually makes the Dow go a lot lower. Now, currently we have Neptune in Pisces, and it'll be there for a number of years. Just because we have Neptune in Pisces, this will help to keep the Dow Jones up and keep the levels up really high. And with Jupiter moving into Virgo, another mutable planet, in August, typically this would be another positive indicator that the market would go up. Now, Saturn. Earlier in the year, Saturn did move into Sagittarius, and although the market didn't go down as much as I thought it would, the movement in the market throughout the entire year has been in a very narrow trading range. It barely loses or gains more than 200 and 250 points at any one time. And yesterday, even when the computer glitch occurred, everything went offline, the market only dropped 240 points. Now, if that was, 1940, 240 point drop, that would be a massive drop in the market. But nowadays, that's nothing. So 240 points, we need to see the market move 500 points if we're really going to have some elements of concern. Now, it did benefit the market with Saturn retrograding back into Scorpio. But Saturn moving into Scorpio affects the market in a way in which it keeps it sort of safe and kind of flat. And it tends to make people want to take their money out of the market. So although the market doesn't usually gain, it usually doesn't fall back too much. And that's because Saturn is a planet of safety. And so people want to be safe, obviously. Now, Saturn will enter Sagittarius in August. And, of course, Jupiter enters to Virgo in August as well, with Neptune remaining in Pisces over the next few years. We should see some correction in the market simply because Saturn is moving into Sag, and this will have an impact on the viability of the market. It may be because of Jupiter and Neptune in two other mutable signs that there's a lot more action to help balance out the market so that it won't fall so far. But in my experience, every time Saturn has entered a mutable sign, the market drops. So I think looking at the market from a long-term point of view, especially as we get into late fall and early winter of this year, 2015, I think the market could have some major up and downs, and we could have more like 300 and 400 point up and downs in the market, especially as we go into next year. And as an astrologer, you can look at the movement of Saturn through the mutables. You can see that every 7.5 years, Saturn creates a big correction wave in the Dow. It's important to remember that the chart of the Dow is very Saturnian ruled. That's why the language of the Dow Jones has limits and stops and all these terms that are really connected to the influence of Saturn in the Dow Jones chart. I don't think the correction for the Dow will be as bad as it can be. And I think that's because we're having the support of Jupiter and Neptune, and I think that will help to sort of balance out some of the Saturn as it moves through Sagittarius. But I do believe the market will go down. I do believe it will probably go down easily, probably a couple of thousand points, maybe 3,000 into this next year, all through the end of 2016. But I still think that the market's going to have a lot of viability, and I don't think it's going to keep the market low and flat. Normally, if we don't have a lot of other planets when Saturn moves through a mutable, then the market seems to really do poorly. Last time when Saturn moved through Virgo, that was a very bad time in the market, and that really pushed the market down a lot. And we have recovered from that. But the good thing is that we have other planets, Neptune and Jupiter in mutables, and that'll definitely keep things up. So anyway, that's all I have for this week. Thanks for joining me and allowing me to share my astrological insights with you. And of course, this is the Lilly Roddy Show, coming to you from the LRS studios here in Houston, Texas. And remember to keep those stars in your eyes. Bye-bye.